The woman I loved betrayed me for a man with more money, but at their perfect wedding I gave them a gift they'll never forget. Sometimes revenge really is sweeter than chocolate. When I walked through the door after a long day at work, I wasn't prepared for the conversation waiting for me. There was my wife Maggie, still dressed sharp in her accountant suit, standing there like she was bracing for a storm. "Mac, we need to talk," she said, her voice low but firm. At the time, I was still in my chocolate-smeared work jumpsuit, tired and clueless about what was about to hit me. "By the way, I'm Mac Reynolds." "Well, technically it's Malcolm Reynolds, but nobody calls me that unless they're mad." "My wife. Her full name is Margaret O'Sullivan Reynolds." Sounds fancy, right? Maybe a little too fancy, but honestly, who am I to judge? Everyone just calls her Maggie anyway. I was born and raised in Scotland. Maggie's from the green fields of Ireland. Looking back, maybe the difference in our roots should have been a clue that we were never perfectly matched. But man, the first time I laid eyes on her, those golden curls, those bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up a room, I was a goner. We met about a decade ago, right after we both finished our time in the military and enrolled in college. I was 22, chasing a dream of becoming a chocolatier with the help of the GI Bill. She was 18, fresh out of high school, setting her sights on a degree in accounting. Strangely enough, it didn't take long for us to get close. Maybe it was her sweet tooth, she had a real love for chocolate, and my passion for crafting every kind of chocolate treat you could imagine. Sweets, pastries, truffles, you name it, I was learning to make it. My mom was a chocolate fanatic too, like most women I knew, so it felt natural to pour my heart into this business. The chocolate world is a goldmine, let me tell you. While most shops scramble for sales around Christmas, chocolate shops like mine thrive all year long. Valentine's Day? That's the real Super Bowl for us chocolatiers. Bigger than Christmas, Easter, or any patriotic holiday you can think of. Every year it blows my mind just how much people crave those sweet little tokens of love. So yeah, I own a small chocolate factory and Valentine's Day is pure madness for me. Anyway, back to the story, my name's Mac. Always has been, always will be. Only time anyone says Malcolm is when my parents are yelling at me. So there I was, standing there exhausted and still covered in cocoa dust. And Maggie's telling me those words no man ever wants to hear. "We need to talk." Every guy knows that phrase isn't casual. It's like a warning shot before a heart hits the ground. It means pain's coming, the kind that no amount of chocolate can sweeten. I took a breath, pulled out a chair, and sat down at the kitchen table, already feeling the weight of the unknown settling in my chest. Sitting there at the kitchen table, it felt like I was standing in front of a firing squad. 10 years together, 8 of them in what I believed was a happy marriage, and somehow here we were. My gut told me everything I knew was about to fall apart. I kept glancing at Maggie, my mind racing in circles, trying to guess what could possibly be coming next. Maybe it was something about our bedroom life? But that didn't add up. We were still close, still had that fire between us several times a week even. Money problems? That seemed even less likely. I was pulling in almost $250,000 a year after expenses, and between both our incomes, we were making close to $355,000. Financially, we were in great shape. There was no real stress, no real fights. And when it came to love, I loved that woman with everything I had. I'd have done anything for her without thinking twice. Could it be that somewhere along the line she stopped loving me? I was still trying to make sense of it all when she slid a manila envelope across the table toward me. The room felt like it shrank around me. "Maggie," I said, my voice almost breaking, "please tell me that's not what I think it is." Her face gave nothing away, just a blank mask, smooth and emotionless. "I'm sorry, Mac," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner. But I want a divorce." My hands clenched on the table, but somehow I kept my voice calm. "Why?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Maggie shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at me. "It's complicated," she murmured. "You found someone else," I said, not asking, just stating the truth I could already feel in my bones. For a second she flinched, just a tiny tremor, but then she nodded. "Yes," she admitted so softly it barely reached my ears. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the anger from spilling over. "And how long?" I forced out. I thought I'd explode, start shouting, demand the name of the guy, demand an explanation, something. But instead I just sat there, stunned into silence. 8 months, she said, her voice small and guilty. I closed my eyes, the number hitting me like a hammer. 8 months. 8 months she'd been with someone else. And the first I was hearing of it was her asking for a divorce. I leaned back in the chair, feeling hollow inside. 8 months, I repeated quietly, shaking my head in disbelief. You've been cheating on me for 8 months and now you just hand me this like it's nothing. I let out a tired breath, already picturing the long road ahead, courtrooms, lawyers, the paperwork. Living in California didn't make things easier either. There's no alienation of affection law here, so revenge wasn't even an option. Maggie sat straighter, almost businesslike now. My lawyer advised me, she said in a low voice. Your chocolate business is yours. I'm not going after that. The house belongs to me through my grandparents' will. I'm giving you a few days to find somewhere to live. Once I remarry, I'll stop asking for alimony. I'm only asking for a minimum amount until then. Nothing more. I gave a dry, hollow laugh. At least she was being considerate, I thought bitterly. After a long pause, I finally looked up at her. Do I even know him? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Maggie stiffened, her jaw tightening. If you hurt him, Mac, you'll be the one behind bars, she said quickly. The warning was unnecessary. I didn't even have the strength to be angry. Not yet. Sure, a big part of me wanted to hurt the guy who tore my life apart. But even through the anger, I knew better. I had a business to protect, a future I wasn't willing to throw away just to satisfy a moment of rage. Still, deep down, I felt like I deserved to at least know the name of the man who had been sneaking around behind my back for the past 8 months. I hated that it had come to this. I wished it could have been different, but there was no escaping reality anymore. Maggie gave me a sad, almost pitying smile, but I wasn't buying it. My mind was already shifting gears, working on a plan for what came next. Fine, I said, keeping my voice steady. I won't fight you on the divorce. If everything's how you say it is, I'll sign the papers. But you better believe I'm having my lawyer go over every word before I put my name on anything. Maggie gave a quick nod. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Mac. For a second, it almost sounded like respect in her voice, but it was too late for that now. She took a breath like she was trying to soften the blow. Just so you know, this isn't about anything you did or didn't do, she said. Reginald and I, well, we just connected. Reginald. The name hit me like a slap. Reginald, Reggie, she called him. And then she dropped another little bomb. Look, she said casually, since Reggie's wealthy, there's no reason for me to ask you for alimony. Let's just call it even and move on. I stared at her, feeling the burn rise in my chest. I knew it was a long shot, but still, after everything we'd been through, after a decade together, she owed me more than just a cold handshake and a pat on the back. If you're serious about that, I said, keeping my voice even, then maybe we can skip the whole ugly fight. But if you're not, don't blame me for what happens next. She shook her head, already emotionally checked out. At that moment, something inside me hardened. When she threw away our entire relationship like it was a waste of her time, like I was just a chapter she was ready to close, something dark stirred inside me. Tomorrow morning, her lawyer, Tim's office, would be sending over the paperwork. In her mind, Maggie was already free, already living some new fantasy life with Reginald. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that tasted like betrayal. I picked up my phone and called the only person I trusted, Katrina Monroe, my manager at McReynolds Chocolate Company. Good old Kate. Always there when I needed someone who wasn't going to lie to my face. You're not spending the night at some motel like a stray dog, Kate said when she heard the news. Get your tail over here right now, Mr. Mac. Strict as ever, that's just how Kate was. And honestly, it felt good to have someone still barking orders at me like everything wasn't falling apart. Yes, ma'am, I said with a tired smile, grabbing my keys and my suitcase. At 32 years old, I thought I had it all figured out. I was fit, successful, a self-made millionaire, and here I was, heartbroken and blindsided by the woman I once would have given my last breath for. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Maggie O'Sullivan Reynolds, turned out to be nothing more than a gold digger in a nice suit. I pulled into Kate's driveway, parking my big black pickup next to her tiny little Ford Fusion. It almost looked like her car was afraid of mine, like it knew it didn't belong in the same league. The V8 engine gave one final growl before I shut it off. Grabbing my suitcase from the bed of the truck, I turned just in time to see Kate walking out to greet me. Without saying a word, she opened her arms wide and I didn't even try to hold back. I dropped everything and let her pull my head against her chest. That big, comforting hug you don't realize you need until you're already falling apart inside. Maybe it wasn't romantic love, maybe it was just the love of a friend who cared. But right then it was enough to keep me from crumbling completely. In that moment, with Kate holding on to me like I wasn't some broken shell of a man, I finally felt like someone still cared. She helped me to my feet and together, her steady, me stumbling, we made it to her living room. I dropped onto her big worn leather couch, feeling like every muscle in my body had given up. Kate sat beside me, flipping through her phone, probably trying to distract both of us. Suddenly she gasped. "You have got to be kidding me," she said, holding the phone up like it burned her fingers. Turns out, a video had just gone viral. Her boyfriend, Darius, locking lips with some other woman for the world to see. Right there, public as a town square gallows. For a second, she managed this broken little laugh, and even through my tears I found myself chuckling too. "Look at us," she said, shaking her head with a sad smile. "Two peas in a messed up pod." I smiled faintly, genuinely grateful that at least Maggie hadn't humiliated me in front of everyone. Unlike poor Kate, Darius made sure the whole world could tune in live to her betrayal. "I'm sorry, Kat," I said quietly, pulling her into a tight hug. "This isn't your fault." Kate wiped her eyes, the sadness flashing into pure anger. "Excuse me while I give that scammer a piece of my mind," she said, grabbing her phone again. I just nodded, sitting back and watching as she hit the dial button with determination. "Hello, Darius," she said, voice calm but dangerous. "Yeah. I just called to let you know I won't be tolerating this behavior. It's over, you hear me? Over." I hope she was worth it. Before he could even open his mouth to respond, Kate hung up and blocked his number like she was swatting a fly. She turned to me with a little smirk and said, "Zero tolerance." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Cheaters don't deserve a second chance." Kate leaned back, still buzzing with fury. "So," she said, folding her arms, "what's the plan for your divorce? Because if she even tries to take everything from you, Mac, I swear, I'll personally knock the wind right out of her." Her fiery loyalty caught me off guard, not that I minded. For a second I was tempted to take offense at being seen as someone who needed defending. But honestly, after everything that happened, it felt good to have someone in my corner. Kate noticed my hesitation and laughed. "I can see the gears turning in your head, Mac," she teased. "You're brewing something. Spill it." She wasn't wrong. Kate had worked with me long enough at the chocolate factory to know when I was cooking up a serious plan. Whether it was fixing a production disaster or, in this case, something a whole lot more personal. A slow, wicked smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "I'm working on a little revenge," I said. "Something so unforgettable that Maggie and Reginald will never be able to scrub it from their memory." Kate laughed, a real belly laugh, as if she could already picture the chaos. Maybe it was the beer we drank that night. Maybe it was just the betrayal still raw in my chest. But by the time I passed out on her couch, I had a plan. And honestly, it made me happier than I'd been in weeks. The next morning, I woke up to the mouth-watering smell of bacon and eggs sizzling on the stove. The rich aroma drifted through the house, making my stomach grumble. Kate even had a fresh cup of coffee waiting, the steam rising in lazy curls. Something about that simple act, breakfast made for me without any strings attached, lit a fire in my chest. It reminded me how long it had been since Maggie had done something just to make me smile. If it hadn't been for Kate, I don't know how I would have kept it together. Her friendship, her loyalty, that's what kept me from drowning in self-pity. And today? Today was the start of a new chapter. One Maggie O'Sullivan Reynolds and Reginald Pennington III would never forget. "You know what I admire about you, darlin'?" I said, giving Kate a tired but genuine smile. "You are hands down the most loyal person I know." Kate chuckled, that warm, sweet laugh of hers. "I love you too, my friend," she said, flashing me a grin that made my chest ache, not with sadness but with gratitude. I stood up and pulled her into a hug, both of us holding on a little longer than usual. Kate was only a few inches shorter than me, so when we hugged, it felt strong, solid, like two battle-worn soldiers leaning on each other. "Hey," I said, squeezing her shoulder, "we're both survivors of some sorry cheaters. And I'm glad you're doing good, Kat." She hugged me tighter for a second before stepping back, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Yeah, well, I'm still keeping an eye on you," she said, pointing a playful finger at me. "You're trouble when you're left to your own devices." I laughed and shook my head. "All right, Mom," I teased, and she gave me a good-natured smack on the arm. The truth was, Kate understood what I was going through better than most. Her parents had divorced when she was young, not because of infidelity but because of the emotional weight her mother carried. Kate had told me once, in a rare vulnerable moment, how her mom struggled with her mental health, eventually turning to alcohol to numb the pain. It hadn't been betrayal that tore her family apart, but it had been devastating all the same. Somehow, through it all, Kat stayed strong. Since high school she had always been a fighter. She was a star hurdler on our track team while I spent my afternoons swinging a bat on the baseball field. She earned herself a full-ride scholarship to the University of California thanks to her speed and determination. Meanwhile, my baseball skills didn't quite get me a scholarship, so I enlisted in the Army figuring I'd earn my future the hard way. After my service, I used the GI Bill to chase my dream, studying culinary arts and eventually opening a chocolate shop. Not long before Maggie and I got married, the shop started to take off. When I needed someone smart and tough to help run the business, Kat, with her newly minted MBA, walked right through the front door and became my manager. We made a good team. She helped me grow the business the right way, slow, steady, and strong. We refused to cave when the big corporations came knocking, waving millions of dollars in our faces. My employees didn't want to work for anyone else, and frankly, neither did I. They believed in me, and that loyalty meant more to me than any fat paycheck ever could. We decided to focus on what we did best: custom orders, top-notch quality, and keeping it small, around 20 employees who loved what they did. Looking back, that decision turned out to be one of the smartest things I ever did. Keeping it personal. Keeping it ours. When Maggie and her lawyers started trying to draw up the terms of the divorce, my attorney, Tim, made sure everything was crystal clear. The chocolate business had been funded by me alone. No penny of Maggie's family money had gone into it, so it remained 100% mine. The house. That was a different story. It had come from Maggie's grandparents, so technically it was hers. Fair enough. I wasn't about to fight over bricks and mortar. And as for my pride and joy, my old Mustang, the one I'd been restoring since high school, that baby was all mine, no question about it. I wasn't expecting the bombshell that Tim dropped during the meeting. He raised the issue plain and simple, that Maggie wanted the divorce finalized quickly so she could marry Reginald Pennington. For a split second, Mrs. Reynolds, still legally Mrs. Reynolds, hesitated, like maybe a sliver of guilt had finally surfaced. But Tim didn't give her much breathing room. He leaned in, pressing the point, while their lawyer, a stiff woman with a frozen smile, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "You do realize," Tim said calmly, "that once you're married to Mr. Pennington, you can simply ask him for money whenever you need it." Maggie reached for the comfort of her lawyer and Reginald again, like she needed to physically cling to her new life. Tim caught my eye across the table and gave a quick glance, a silent, "You seeing this?" I answered him with the smallest shrug, as if to say, let them dig their own hole. While the three of them whispered and plotted their next steps, I sat back, letting them fumble through it. Eventually, the lawyer turned her serious gaze to me. "And what are you offering as fair compensation, Mr. Reynolds?" she asked coolly. I smiled. "She can take all the furniture," I said, my voice as calm as still water. There was a murmur of surprise between them, a little quieter this time, less sure of themselves. They exchanged glances, waiting for Tim to intervene, but he simply nodded at me. I stood up slowly, tucking my chair in neatly. "And as for this woman?" I said, tossing a smile over my shoulder as I turned to leave. "No hard feelings." I walked out of that office with a weight lifted from my shoulders. The divorce was practically done. No alimony. No drawn-out war. Just freedom. And man, it tasted sweet. Halfway to my car, I remembered something important. I turned back around, pushing the door open. "Oh, Maggie," I called out loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Before I go, I need to return something." She looked confused, her brow furrowing. I held out my hand, palm up. Without a word, Maggie slipped off her wedding ring and engagement ring, her grandmother's ring, and placed them in my hand. I nodded with a polite smile. "Thank you," I said simply, closing my fingers around the rings like I was putting the final nail in a coffin. By the time I got into my car, I was grinning from ear to ear. Freedom never looked so good. Later that day, Kat and I hit the road, her little Ford trailing behind my roaring V8 engine. The low rumble under the hood felt like strength vibrating through my bones. We stopped for a simple meal, burgers and fries. Nothing fancy, just two old friends eating and laughing like the rest of the world couldn't touch us anymore. It was strange how betrayal had built something new between us. A bond formed not out of love or longing, but out of pain and loyalty. Still, as we sat there, the old hurt surfaced. I pushed my plate away and leaned back, shaking my head. "I still can't believe it," I muttered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I didn't even know she was cheating on me. Not once. I must have been blind, or just plain stupid." Kat put her hand over mine and squeezed. "No, Mac," she said gently. "You loved her. That's not stupidity. That's trust. And she's the one who broke it, not you." I nodded, but inside, the self-doubt gnawed at me. Sitting across from her, I realized how much she had carried too, her own betrayal, her own heartbreak. I reminded myself, she's your friend. Just your friend. Even if my nerves were starting to tangle in my stomach, even if I couldn't completely ignore how beautiful Kat looked sitting across from me, I kept it buried. She was a friend. She had always been just a friend. No matter what strange, new feelings started to creep in, I had always been aware of how stunning Kat was. Even back when we were just kids running around high school hallways, I noticed it. And last night at her house, seeing her standing there, that effortless beauty, the kind any red-blooded American man would appreciate, well, it wasn't something you could just ignore. But feelings aside, I knew my heart was still tangled up in the mess Maggie had left behind. One step at a time, I reminded myself. Early that morning, I stood by the edge of the cliffs just outside town, watching the first rays of sunlight wash over the rocks below. The wind whipped against me, carrying the salty spray of the ocean into the air. I reached into my pocket, pulled out Maggie's wedding ring, the one I'd taken back from her, and without a second thought, I hurled it out into the crashing waves. It felt symbolic, like tossing the last piece of that broken marriage into the endless sea. Sure, the divorce paperwork wasn't officially stamped yet, but that simple act gave me the peace of mind I desperately needed. It was my way of saying goodbye, not just to Maggie but to the man I used to be. The one who trusted too easily. But don't get me wrong, I hadn't forgotten about my plan for Maggie and good old Reginald. Not even close. As the old song lyrics kept spinning in my mind, payback is a thing you gotta see. This time it would be personal. This time I'd orchestrate every detail myself. And it would be something neither of them would forget for the rest of their lives. A few nights before their wedding, I paid a little visit to the catering supplier, the one handling their precious chocolate wedding cake. Grinning like a devil, I swapped out the standard cake mix with my own special recipe. Let's just say it was designed to leave a lasting impression. Nothing harmful, mind you, but unforgettable in all the wrong ways. Fast forward to the big day. Dressed sharp in an Armani suit that made me feel like $1,000,000. I waited in Kat's living room while she finished getting ready. Do I look presentable? I asked nervously, adjusting my tie. But when I turned around and saw her, my breath caught in my throat. She was absolutely breathtaking. Kat wore a deep emerald green dress that hugged every curve like the fabric was in love with her. It shimmered under the light, refusing to let go of her figure. Her hair, cut just at her shoulders, framed her flawless face perfectly. I stood there, mesmerized, struggling to find words that wouldn't make me sound like a complete fool. Before either of us could say much, there was a sharp knock at the door. When I opened it, I found myself staring up, way up, at a giant in a black suit. For a second I thought we had the wrong address, but then I recognized him. One of Reggie Boy, Pennington's hired muscle. It figured. The Penningtons made a lot of enemies over the years, thanks to their cutthroat business dealings and shady backroom deals. Guards like this guy were as necessary to them as breathing. The Pennington version of the golden rule? Do unto others before they do it to you. Real classy bunch. Still, I couldn't help but chuckle at the idea of a bouncer, standing guard at a wedding. Felt about right for Reggie Boy. Kat walked up beside me, looking every bit the queen she was, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of something deeper in her expression. Memories flickering behind those beautiful eyes. Memories of her own parents' marriage. Of her father's disappointed face when her mom spiraled into addiction. Of how hard Kat had fought to build something better for herself. Today was about reclaiming a little justice. Today was about standing tall while the people who betrayed us got exactly what they deserved. Sure, I wanted revenge. Seeing Reginald standing there all smug in his fancy suit, knowing what he had done, it took everything in me not to walk up and knock that pompous grin right off his face. But I held back. I reminded myself that real revenge, the kind that sticks, wasn't delivered with fists. It was delivered with patience. And a little creativity. I won't bore you with all the tedious details of the wedding, the empty vows, the phony exchange of rings already tainted by lies. None of it mattered. The moment Maggie turned and winked at me across the room, as if she had won, I knew I had made the right choice. Because her little victory lap was about to blow up right in her face. The ceremony ended and Kat and I took our seats at the reception, pretending to play along. Dinner was served, fresh lobster, and I'll admit, it was absolutely delicious. If nothing else, at least the food made up for the nausea I felt sitting among all that fake happiness. But the real show? That didn't start until they rolled out the wedding cake. Reginald and Maggie beamed as they posed with the knife, slicing through the top tier of the cake together like some fairy tale couple. There was a lot of cooing and clapping from the crowd. They even fed each other little pieces of cake before, predictably, smashing frosting across each other's faces. Everyone roared with laughter, lining up eagerly for a slice. Kat and I, though, decided to hold back. We knew what was coming. We just had front row seats. Not long after the first few guests dug in, Reggie started to shift uncomfortably in his immaculate navy pants. He grabbed at his stomach, face turning a delicate shade of green. Maggie wasn't far behind. Her face crumpled, and without a word, the two of them bolted toward the bathrooms. Kat and I shot each other a look, and then bolted too, barely managing to stifle our laughter as we raced for the exit. Once we found a quiet spot outside, the dam broke. We doubled over, clutching our stomachs, tears of pure, helpless laughter streaming down our faces. "Oh my God, Mac!" Kat gasped between fits of giggles, trying and failing to catch her breath. I leaned against a wall, laughing just as hard, every nerve in my body shaking with the absurdity of it all. Watching Maggie and Reggie sprint from their own wedding reception like toddlers who had lost a fight with bad milk was perfect. Some might call it petty. I call it poetic. The best part? Nobody could trace it back to me. The cake mix swap had been flawless, and nobody but Kat and I knew the secret recipe behind the chaos. No connection. No trail. Just good old-fashioned justice with a dash of chocolate. Later that evening, after we'd wiped the tears from our eyes and finally settled down, I remembered another moment from earlier that week. A potential client had visited my chocolate factory, sniffing around like he owned the place. He had practically drooled over my samples, expecting to walk out with everything he wanted on a silver platter. During a tour of his operation, he had shown me their kitchens proudly, talking about how they specialized in creating desserts people could trust. Yeah, sure. Trust. Just like Maggie had trusted Reggie. And look where that got them. When Kat and I finally made our way back to our table, the noise had died down, though people were still whispering about the incident. Meanwhile, Kat leaned in close, her expression suddenly serious. "Mac," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "As for that kiss." "I know," I said quietly, cutting in before she could finish. "I probably crossed a line tonight, but you just looked so beautiful, Kat. I couldn't help myself." She smiled gently, reaching up to press her finger against my lips. "Let me finish, baby," she whispered. Her voice was soft but steady, full of a kind of warmth that hit deeper than any words. "That kiss," she said, her eyes shining, "was the best kiss of my life. You're a good man, Mac Reynolds. Don't you ever forget that." My heart, already battered and bruised, felt like it was finally beating again for the first time in months. After that night, life slowly began to move forward. We stayed busy, between running the factory, dealing with special orders, and navigating the weird aftermath of the Pennington disaster. The only hiccup came during a business meeting with a new restaurant owner. He had originally reached out to discuss a potential collaboration with Kat, but during their first meeting, he couldn't seem to keep his hands to himself. Kat handled it in true Kat fashion, a quick, well-deserved slap across the face, and a firm warning to stay out of our business. We dropped him without hesitation. Ironically, when Pennington's family came sniffing around for wedding caterers, that same shady restaurant got roped into the planning. To me, it felt like karma tossing me the perfect setup. Two birds, one stone. The aftermath of what the news started calling the infamous Brown wedding spread faster than wildfire. Every news outlet picked it up, video clips, memes, late-night jokes, you name it. Kat and I laughed until we cried. We never heard from Maggie or Reginald again. Rumor had it, Reggie Boy tried to sue the cake supplier, but the guy had already skipped town. Some say he fled all the way back to Italy to dodge the lawsuits. Nobody really knows what happened to him after that. Not that we cared. As if karma hadn't punished him enough. Less than a year into their marriage, Reginald Pennington IV was caught red-handed, literally, in someone else's bed. And not just any someone, it was another man's wife. The husband caught them in the act and, from what we heard, wasted no time calling Maggie to tell her all about it. Talk about poetic justice. About 4 months after that mess, one rainy evening, I was lounging at home when Kat, now very visibly pregnant, kissed me on the cheek before heading into the kitchen. There was a knock at the door. I pulled it open and there she was, Maggie. Standing on my porch, drenched, crying, shaking like a leaf. "What do you want, Maggie?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry, Mac," she sobbed. "I'm sorry for everything." I leaned casually against the doorframe, feeling nothing but a cool breeze where love used to live. "Hey," I said simply. "You're the one who wanted to move on, remember?" She wiped at her face, trying to collect herself. "I found out Reginald was cheating on me," she choked out between sobs. I sighed and shook my head slightly. "Well," I said honestly, That's unfortunate. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of regret pulling her down. I'm really sorry, Mac, she whispered again, voice breaking. I truly am.